And then we can say elif num is greater than 5, we print medium. And then we do else, we print small. So we see here since 10 is not greater than 15, Python then checks whether or not 10 is greater than 5, which is true. So then medium gets printed, and then everything else afterwards is ignored. Does that kind of make sense? Oh, yeah. Ethan?
Can you sandwich as many elifs as you want between the if and else?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You could do like elif num greater than 3. You print like medium small. And then notice that over here, even though 10 is greater than 3, this statement is ignored since this statement is already found to be true. However, if we switch the order, then Python comes across this elif first. So it prints out the medium small, and then over here, everything afterwards is ignored. So yeah, absolutely, good question. You can sandwich as many elifs as necessary. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Oh, so before we move on, are there any other questions? Any other questions? If there are no questions, we can move on to some of the other cool things that we can do with Python. Give me a sec. Okay. So we'll start off with another quote from Bill Gates. He says, I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it. So this goes hand in hand with what we're doing now because programming essentially makes life so much easier because you can write a program to do a lot of things for you and that lets you be lazy. And I'm sure we all like to be lazy, right? So let's brainstorm some things in our lives that we think that we can use code to speed up. So anything that comes to mind, feel free to raise your hand or unmute and share what you think.
Like making food.
Yeah, making food, you can code up like an algorithm that can give you like a weekly grocery list and like food plan and everything, so you don't have to think about that. Yeah, absolutely. Santre?
Uh, doing the laundry.
Yeah, you can like program a robot do your laundry for you. That'd be nice. Automatic umbrella holder. I like that. It's kind of raining outside. That would be nice. Yes, security cameras, definitely. They're coded up so people don't break into your house. Sarah, yeah?
Cleaning the floor.
Cleaning the floor, yeah. We got these cool little like vacuum robots that can do that for us now. It's all programmed. Automatic washing machine, absolutely. Smart doors, doing the dishes. Yeah, random letter generator, interesting. Send messages. Automatic dog feeder, I like that. That would be very convenient. So yeah, homework definitely. So yeah, these are all great ideas. So a lot of things we can see that we can use code to speed up, basically. And some examples of some very practical uses of code are inputs. So in Python, you can get user input. So basically, the console would ask you to type something in, and then your code would run based on what you typed in. So if we want to input something, all we have to do is write input in parentheses. And then usually we would have to do something with the input. So what we would do is store it to a variable. And then if we put something inside of these parentheses, that message would be displayed to the user before they give their input. So for example, if we say A equals input, what is your name? So this input would be stored to the variable A. So for example, the user would see this message, what is your name? And then if they type in Joe, for example, and then they hit enter, the word Joe would be stored to A. And then Python would keep running your code and it would come across this print statement and it would print your name is plus A. And right now A is Joe. So it would print out your name is Joe. And for strings, a plus sign just means concatenation, and that just means combining two strings together. So the Joe and your name is gets combined together and printed out. And that's what we see as our output. And then we can also code like a method that can divide two numbers. So if we have A being like a number of A could be just a number of the user's choice, and then B is another number of the user's choice. And then we would print out if you divide the first number by the second number, you get A divided by B. And then this string over here just turns the A divided by B, which is a double, into a string. So then you can concatenate it to this other string. And in Python, you can just cast data types, meaning like change a string to an integer or an integer to a string, or just change any data type to another data type by putting the data type name and then parentheses and then whatever you want to change. So actually over here, A and B should be casted to ints as well because the input by default gives you a string. So for example, let me just get that type up real quick. So we would do int input, give me a number, because this input over here would technically be a string, and then we would have to make that into an int so that we can do the division. So once we have that, the user can choose any numbers that they want. They type it in, and then when you divide, it would do this division algorithm. Divide the first by the second number, and then print out the result. And we will do some exercises with inputs later. So any questions about anything at this point? I know we're moving a little fast. Yeah, Soham?
Can't you say for the string, do you really need the string for the last slide? Because if you go back up, it's just like basically 4 divided by 3. What does a string even do?
Oh yeah, good question. So the string over here, you're talking about this part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 4 divided by 3 is 1.33333, which is a double, right? But in Python, at least, you can't directly concatenate a double to a string, which is this part right here. So you can't use a plus sign between a string and a double. You have to do it between two strings. So what the str here does is turns the 1.33 into a string. So it would still be the same number, but in the form of a string instead of a double. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions? So if we're all good with questions, if we are all good with questions, we can move on to libraries. So Python offers a lot of libraries, and some of the most common examples are NumPy, Pandas, TensorFlow, and Django. And these are libraries are basically these giant collections of pre-written code and functions that can make your life a lot easier. They're available to the public, so anyone can import this library and use it. So here, this meme that kind of shows like how important libraries are, especially to Python users. And they just make your life a lot easier so you don't end up like this guy on the left over here. So let's like take a look at some of these libraries. So NumPy does all your powerful math operations. Like it can take your numbers, analyze them, and create all these cool charts. And some of these you guys might be more familiar with, like scatter plots, bar charts, histograms, box plots. But then there's also monstrosities like this guy right here on the right that would be a pain in the butt for humans to have to go through and analyze, make sense of. But that's where a lot of the code in NumPy comes in. So these are NumPy is used very commonly by people who study math. And we also have Pandas, which does a lot of your data analysis stuff. Like over here, we have this study with people's arrivals at this airport. And then Pandas can basically help you determine stuff like the mean, median, skewness, all of your like statistical stuff. We also have TensorFlow, which was originally developed by Google, but then eventually like became open to the public. So now like anyone can use it. And it's used for a lot of machine learning and AI stuff. And it plays into a lot of neural networks, which we would be talking more about on next Friday, which is our AI day. So stay tuned for that. And then we also have Django, which is used very commonly in web development. I'm sure a lot of you guys listen to Spotify, watch YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, Quora, all that good stuff. And all of that was made using the help of Django. So for these libraries, all you guys have to know for now is that they're a thing and they can be very helpful sometimes, but you guys might not necessarily be using them quite yet, especially if you're just like beginning in your programming journey. But they are used by a lot of people, and just keep that in the back of your mind. So now we will talk about some ways that you can like practice. Oh, is there a question? Let me see. Oh, sorry, someone was just joining the call. Okay, anyways, so some ways to practice. Let's look at some resources first. So how you can get started with Python, especially if you're a beginner. First of all, you're here at this camp, which is great. And then it's just a great introduction for those of you guys who are just starting out in your programming journey. And then it's also good to just experiment by yourself. Like you can try to write little programs, do some simple tasks, and a lot of our homework assignments are good ways for you to just experiment with code. And then obviously you're going to get stuck somewhere along the way. That's part of the process. So if that happens, you can use resources like W3 Schools. YouTube videos are great. You can use Stack Overflow to ask questions, or maybe someone else had already asked that question, because a lot of times people have the same questions. So Stack Overflow is also amazing. My personal favorite is W3 Schools because it just has these really comprehensive guides for every single topic in every single programming language. And it's very helpful. And remember, these slides are all posted in the Google Docs, so you can refer back to it to get an idea of the resources that you can use. And then a lot of programmers, as they develop along their journey, they find themselves in the expansion stage. So they're the ones creating the latest technologies and all those future projects. And especially today with AI, that's like a big part of what we're expanding. And so who knows what we'll be doing in like 10, 20 years. So hopefully a lot of you guys will see yourselves at this stage. And yeah. So for now though, let's open up this IDE. I'll post it in the chat too. So I posted it in the chat and I pinned the message. So you guys can get started with this, open it up. We'll be using it in just a few minutes. And before we get started with our exercises, does anyone have like any questions at all? Just about anything that we talked about. Okay, so if there are no questions, oh, Santre, yeah?
If we're using ifs, do we have to put commas?
An if statement, you do not have to put commas in if statements. We just use semicolons, like equals 5. If num is greater than 10, yes. So yeah, there are no commas in an if statement. There's just a colon. Did I say semicolon? I meant colon. So yeah, we have a colon here, and then we have an indent here. That's really just all the syntax you need for if statements. But yeah, no commas needed. Good question. Yeah, if you have your own IDEs, just feel free to use those, like whatever you feel the best with. Yeah. Yeah. Do libraries help you code? So libraries come with a lot of pre-written code that you can use. So basically, you don't even have to write your own code a lot of the times. You just use whatever, just use the code that is already written for you in the library. Yeah, just any IDE that you have, if it works, it works. So you can absolutely use it. And also to import libraries, all you have to do is the word import and then whatever like library name. So for example, there is a library called random. So if you want to import the library random, all you have to do is like import random, right? And then random has some of its own like methods that you can use. So you can say, oh, PyCharm is good too, yeah. So you can say a equals random. So randint basically generates a random integer or whole number value from you give it a lower and upper bound. And then what I did here is I generated a random value and stored it to the variable a. So if we print a, so we can see here that it generated 5. And if I do it again, it generated 1. So this is just an example of a library that you can use. And then randint would be like a function that it has that you won't even have to program yourself because it's already programmed for you. And keep this random stuff in mind because we'll be using that for one of our exercises. And yeah, so if there are no more questions, we can get moving on to our exercises. I want to give you guys some more time to be able to do those. So yeah, our first exercise involves an empty list. So you start with an empty list and then you fill the list with the numbers 0 through 9 and print out the list. So remember to make an empty list first, store that to a variable, and then remember the append method adds whatever element you want to the end of the list. So that could be very helpful here. And a for loop could also be helpful because it would be a pain in the butt to do append 10 times. So just a hint. I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on that. Once you have your code ready and tested, feel free to copy and paste it in the chat, and then we can take a look at some of those. Let me just check for now if there are any questions, any hand raises. Oh, someone's already, wow. Okay, I'm gonna take Anisha's code. I like it. So we have nums, that's our list, and it's empty right now. And then we do a for loop for I in range 10. So I takes on the values of 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. And then we do nums.append I, so we are adding 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9 to the end of the list nums, one by one. And then we print out the list. Yeah. Yeah, great job, Anisha. And well, you don't have to make I a string. Good question. You can make it a string, but or I guess over here they're all strings. So yeah, you can cast it to a string. Good point. Yeah. Well, I mean, our list should be empty at first. So nice try, but we're gonna try to use the append method to add stuff to our empty list. So yeah, great job, guys. Are there any questions about exercise 1? Any questions? How do you use append? Good question. So all you have to do for append is the list name and then a period and the word append. So like if I want to add like 50 to the end of our list, all I have to do is nums.append 50. And then we print nums. And now we have an extra 50 at the end of our list. So it's just list name, period, append. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So if we are all good here, there are no more questions regarding exercise 1. We can move on to our next exercise. So exercise 2, we are going to create an empty list first, again, like same as before. And then we will add 3 strings, which are blue, red, and green. And then we will print out the colors from the list one by one. So notice the difference here. We print out the entire list at once. Here we print out each element of the list, each string, in a separate line. So you will probably need to use append again. And then think about how you can print out all the elements of the list in different lines. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on that. Once you have your code ready, feel free to copy and paste it in the chat as always. just check real quick if there are any hand raises, any questions. Oh, okay. So, oh, yeah. Elaine, I like your responses. Just one little thing that I would change. Oh, yeah. Yeah, your new response is perfect. So let's take a look at Elaine's. Sorry if I'm like butchering these name pronunciations, but yeah. So we have an empty list color, and we do three different appends: color dot append blue, color dot append red, and color dot append green. So now our list of colors has these three strings in it: blue, red, and green. So now to print each of them out one by one, we would have to use a for loop. So for I in range of 3, since there are 3 elements that we are printing out, um, we will traverse, meaning look at every element in the list. So we will traverse the list. So when I is 0 and we print color of I, we print the index 0 in color. So index 0, we have the word blue. So blue gets printed. And then I becomes 1. So we print color of 1. And that means index 1, which is the second element. And that is the word red. And then finally, I goes to 2. So color of 2 would be index 2 in the list color. And then that would be green. That gets printed out. And our for loop finishes. And yeah, perfect. And notice that we cannot append everything at once. We can't do something like blue, green, red, because there would be an error because append only takes in one parameter. Can't take in more than one. So unfortunately, you do have to type out append 3 times. Yeah, Anisha?
So, I did the same thing, but instead of range, I just did for I in colors, and then I got a type error. Does that not work?
So for I in color, print, what did you say for, is this what your code looked like?
Yeah, it looks like that.
Okay, let's take a look. It seems like it works. Why don't you copy and paste your code in the chat? Let me see if. Oh, yeah, I see what happened here. So what you did was the same thing, except over here, I is the actual color. So instead of saying colors of I in the print statement, you just have to change this to I, because
Oh,
what's going on here is, yeah, I is taking on the value of blue, red, and green. So I is physically being assigned those values. So you can't say colors of blue because that's not an index. So that's why there was an error. But
oh,
that's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that a lot of people actually struggle with in AP Computer Science A. So it's awesome that you brought up this point. Yeah, thanks, Anisha. Any other questions about exercise 2? How does blue, green, and red go to different lines? Oh, good question. So when you do a print statement, Python automatically puts a new line afterwards. So if you don't want a new line, you would actually have to put end equals this. So you have to put end equals double quotes, and then they'll be on the same line. So by default, they're on different lines. By default, each print statement comes with a new line afterwards. So that's why they're on different lines. Yeah, good question. So if we are all good on exercise 2, let's move on to exercise 3. Now we want a game where you give the program 2 numbers, which is user input, and it generates a random number within the range. So the 2 numbers would be the lower and upper bound. And then you have the user enter their guess within that range, and then they win if their guess is equal to the random number. Otherwise, they lose. So for example, if your code would ask me for a lower bound, I would put 3. And then it asked me for an upper bound, I would put 8. It asked me for a guess, and I would put 5. So if 5 is the random number generated between 3 and 8, then I would win. Otherwise, I'd lose, and then it would tell me what the correct number is. So this one's a little challenging. We will need to import a library, namely random. And yeah, just take a shot at this. I'll give you guys some time to work on this one. And once you have your code ready, feel free to copy and paste it in the chat, and then we can take a look. Let me check the chat. We will not use a list here. Yeah, unless you want to, but a list wouldn't be necessary for this exercise. Okay. Oh, okay, so we got a response from. So the input statement. Okay. Yeah. So to input something, all you have to do is like A equals input, and then you can say like, give me an upper bound, and then it would tell me to give it an upper bound, and I would say 10. And yeah, since I didn't do anything with it, that's it. But I mean, you guys would have to do something with the upper and lower bounds, right? So yeah, but that's how you do input. Yeah, good question. And remember to import random, you just say import random. Oops, random. And then remember the random.randint gives you a random whole number within 2 bounds. So let's say like 0 and 10, for example. So hopefully this can help some of you get started. Oh, let's see. Elaine, I like your code. So, except the first line, you don't need to import. Importing is, you don't need to say from random import. You can just say import random. You could, yeah, you could just say import random. So yeah, in Python, importing is like super easy. You just import and then library name. So let's see. We have num equals int input lower bound. So over here, it is taking in your input, which is a string, but it's casting that to an int, so that's good. And then we have num1, so a second number is input upper bound, so another input that's casted to an int stored to num1, good. And then a equals, we would have to say random dot randint, but yeah, otherwise we're good here. Num and num1, so lower bound and upper bound, and then guess, you take in another input, and then we have an if statement. I like that. If guess is equal to a, we win. Otherwise, we say the correct number was, and then we tell them the random number that we generated, and we have to make that a string first because we are concatenating it to a string. So let's test it out. Lower bound, I'll say 10. Upper bound, 20. What do you guys want me to guess? Which die? 19? 9? Well, it's between 10 and 20. 15? 15 sounds reasonable. I'll go with 15. Oh, I won! Nice job! Nice job, Joel. Good job. Okay, let's do another one. Let's run it again. Lower bound, 20. Upper bound, 30. Which did I guess this on? 22? Sure. Oh, 24. So yeah, it's important to test code like this multiple times so that you know that the random is actually generating like a random number and make sure like everything's working. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, I like your code too, Ethan. I'll just copy and paste it here. So over here, you define the lower and upper bounds already. So it's like you already gave the values. So the user wouldn't have a say in what the lower bound or upper bound should be. But yeah, other than that, it looks pretty much the same. So if you want to take in user input, you could say input, give me a lower bound. And then we would have to make this whole thing into an int, since by default it's a string. And then we do the same thing with upper bound. So yeah, nice job, nice job. So any questions about this game? About exercise 3? Wow, okay, let's be nice. I mean, yeah, let's, yeah, Ethan, your code, oh, one thing is you have to put int after the input. So in your first line, upper equals input upper, you would have to cast it to an int first before using it. But yeah, otherwise it does work. But be nice to the user. They don't suck. We don't suck. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, that's it for exercise 3. Any other questions about any of the exercises? Okay, so if we're all good, we have, let me just introduce our homework real quick. So our homework is to make a birthday calculator that takes in your birth year and then it outputs your age in years. So it would obviously take in user input, which is a birth year, and then think about how to calculate someone's age given the birth year. And your output might be off by year, and that's okay, just as a hint. So for example, if someone says that their birth year is 2006, well, they should actually say 19 at this point. Should actually say 19. But yeah. So think about user input and yeah, take a shot at this. So that's all we have time for today. Remember, the slides are posted in the Google document and all of the homework and the resources are there. So yeah, see you guys tomorrow. Have a lovely rest of your day. And yeah, thanks for joining us today. Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye.